Hello, and welcome to another on-demand training provided by Garland. This training will cover Chick-fil-A specific next generation clamshell grills, or the 2.0 grill. The Chick-fil-A warranty specific for Chick-fil-A. And the warranty for every chain, like I said in previous trainings, are indeed different per chain. For this chain, we have a 2-year parts and labor from the date it left the factory or from the date of startup, whichever comes first. So basically, we give pretty much 6 months of storage time frame in order to get that warranty to start. After the 6 months time frame, every month that passes reduces a month off the warranty. So that's just a way of looking at it. When completing that warranty call, an FAS technician is required to do the following: update life tracking. That's something that we've talked about in the other trainings where we go into diagnostics, go down to advanced and hit start, enter in the password SERVGCR, and go to the life tracking, hit start on life tracking, and then go to that component you just replaced and update it. Basically, on Chick-fil-A, that update process is percentages of life left in that component. So some of your components, when you replace it, they ask you on the email dispatch, write down the expected life percentages of that particular component when you replace it. Also, the other thing you have to do is download and email error logs to cfa.logs@wellbuilt.com on every service call. So that's pretty easy. You take a blank USB stick and you put it in the USB slot, and you go to import export and you download system logs to the USB. When you're done, you put it in your computer. It's a small, pretty small file. Copy the file into an email and then send it off here. Pretty simple. Obtain the cook cycle on the UI. Okay, that's where you go under statistics and the diagnostics and you get your cook cycle. This way you obtain the total cook cycles. And then at the end of the job, you have to call Garland to close out any of the calls that has been dispatched. Dispatching, we have a 4-hour versus a 24-hour. Again, every chain has a different type of dispatch. This applies to calls except for the customer deferred calls, and it's during business hours. So a customer deferred call is a customer that calls an agency directly and not go through the dispatch system, or if the customer defers the response time because he doesn't want to pay the overtime portion. Okay, so that would be what a deferred call means. So a 4-hour response is if the store only has one grill and the unit's 100% down where it will not cook. Of course, overtime has to be approved by the store. It's not covered under the warranty. And that would be qualified if the store says no overtime, it's a deferred call. That means the dispatch time frame is no longer valid. Again, don't forget, download error codes, obtain cook cycle, and call Garland, close out the call. A 24-hour response is any number of grills in the store, and overtime is not approved as well. That has to be approved by the store. Safety, we know safety. We've talked about safety. Always remove power before servicing or energy before servicing the unit. One thing that I want to make sure that I tell you, and I got to get a picture on the other trainings. I don't talk about this, but the conduit that comes up through here, we usually put a zip tie on it to hold it down for the crating, to make the crating a little less high. Cut this zip tie, don't cut the conduit, cut the zip tie before we plug it in and turn it on. If that zip tie is still on the guide loop in the back here, it will turn around and cause that conduit to kink and possibly pinch some wires in the conduit. And we know if the low voltage wire is grounded or pinched in the arm or the conduit assembly going down through the conduit, we have a blank screen. So we want to make sure we try to avoid that. Again, your safety stickers, again, like I said in all the other trainings, if you can't read them, you got to replace them. And here's those stickers. Again, we do have, you see a QR code in the front of this unit. There's a QR code in all our clamshell grills moving out of the factory now. That's our dispatch number. Don't cover that up with your agency stickers. Put your agency stickers on the side next to the data tag. This way the customer can still call you, but it's right next to the data tag, so when the customer calls, they can actually turn around and give you the model and serial number right away. All right, what's different with this grill when you're leveling it, it's only a single lane grill, and you have to level the grill so the front is a ½ inch lower than the back. So this is what they're achieving. 33.5 from the cooking surface to the floor in the front, and then 34 inches from the cooking surface to the floor in the rear. Casters, we've talked about casters. We know not to have the red mark visible. Startup forms, again, we know that startup has to be done by a factory authorized service agency. There's a step-by-step form that to follow. Make sure we're not pencil whipping the answers. So if it asks what the voltage is, check the voltage. Like, you just don't assume because the data tag says it's 208, that is 208. Actually check the voltages. Again, the UI is the same as all the other grills. So everything else is pretty much the same. And basically, what I'm going to just simply say is, again, Chick-fil-A, chain accounts, you're not changing recipes. Okay, so if you're not getting the product to cook correctly, maybe it's something that you didn't do in the setup process, or the refrigerator or freezer or whatever they're using to put on there is either too cold or too warm, and that could cause a hotter product. Diagnostics button right here. Again, that's where you go and get you your advanced setting, your diagnostics log, your status, and your statistics under here, under diagnostics. Again, remember, under diagnostics, advanced, you have to use a password to get into advanced. All right, when the customer uses press and go, this is what they see. There's only one menu available for Chick-fil-A, and you'll see the recipes under here. Now, this is an outdated picture, but it shows basically what you're going to see. You'll always see the first 8 recipes in the list under that menu. Like, for example, McDonald's, they have limited time offers like the McRib. They like to see that McRib during that time frame up here on the first screen. They don't want to use the down arrow to go find it. So at that point, we have to move that recipe up in the menu, and we do that under the Menus tab. On the grill surface or the cooking surfaces, you're going to use a release agent, 4 to 6 squirts on the bottom and then 4 to 6 squirts on the top. Do the bottom first, this way the hot oil doesn't drip on your arm. And of course, we know in hood height, we need to be 1-inch clearance. Hood height calibrations is identical to all the grills. This doesn't change other than the fact that you have to make sure you have 1-inch clearance. Accessories. The side skirts that you see here, number 1 and number 2, and then the front vapor shield, or front deflector shield is what they actually call it, but I call it the vapor shield. They have to be installed during cooking. That holds the heat inside the area. Again, the grates, the design of the grates act as a cooling fin or heat sinks, and you could actually end up not having enough heat in here to cook if the side skirts are off, so they have to be installed. Again, here's I gotta update this picture. Here's a better picture of it. If they're using this one or these, they should be obsolete. They shouldn't be using them. They should be using over here. This particular picture is about 10 months old, maybe 11 months now. So they should be all have this particular vapor shield and side skirts now. Your brush handle and accessories that go onto the brush, it's all broken down to different parts. I've seen technicians send pictures where they do not replace the end pieces or the parts for the brush, but there are part numbers here. It's available on PartsTown to order it through there. And here's some more of the accessories. We have your detailing tool, your brush, your oil can and grease bucket, your roller for the oil, and your spatula. Okay, service tools are recommended 2 wrenches. We send 2 wrenches and 1 L tool with this grill. Now, unlike the grill platforms where there's the smooth surfaces, we're able to use a ball gauge to level the platen. On here, we have to use the L tool just because it's going in between cooking grates, not a flat surface. Component identification. The components in here are identical to what the other grills are. With exception, there's a different part number for the actuator. The actuator motor is slightly different in size, and that's basically in the back here where the gearbox is and the shaft. That's different size than what's in the other next generation grills. Also, you can see closer on this particular picture that ground lug coming up to the ground. Make sure that ground lug is nice and grounded. And you see your encoder wire here that's going up, and it's away from any of your high voltage wires. Here's your SIB board, same SIB board. Here's your solid state relay board, same solid state relay board. What's different, we do not have a control contactor. We only have one contactor in this grill for Chick-fil-A. We don't have that control terminal block, so we don't have the fuses in the terminal block. We have the 10 amp fuses right here in inline fuses. Your contactor is a 208 240 volt contactor. Chick-fil-A does not use hood interlock systems. And you can see here the cord and plug set come directly into the contactor. So keep that in mind. And again, the wires don't change. Again, L1 black, L2 red, L3 blue. And the same thing you see here, black, red, and blue. There's a little tape, blue tape or heat shrink there, or a blue marker, whatever it is that they put on there. That's right there. Again, your thermocouples and your ribbon cable, that's your communications. This is your communication for your UI, encoder connection over here, outputs to the actuator motor, inputs for your power to the motor section of your board, and power for your actual board. And of course, here's your 22 pin connection that goes to your green push button, and it's also your jumpers to tell you that, hey, I'm a master because I don't have to share my power with another lane. There's only one lane in this unit. And of course, this is your upper and lower home switches in the rear of the unit. And your AC/DC power supply board is on the right side of that lane vertically. And you have your diode, your reversing diodes. There's one here visible, and the other one's usually tucked down in here somewhere. All right, we know the AC to DC power supply board. Again, this picture is a little bit nicer. It's clearer, if you would, where you can see the actual board. So here it is on the right-hand side of that lane, and it's mounted horizontally. Your outputs are right here. Here you can see your fuse holders. This is your connection to your switch. Right here is that potentiometer where you can adjust to 24 volts output. Okay, so again, we're going to check that information. We can go into the UI, go to Diagnostics, and we're going to go down to statuses, and we're going to check the voltages of your three-phase power. You can check it from there, see what's coming into the grill, what it's reading. Also check it on the wall, make sure you have the correct voltages, that is reading the correct voltages. And then right below your three-phase power is your 24-volt supply to the SIB. That should be reading 24 volts. If it's not, adjust it right here. And there's that potentiometer. All right, on the test, you're going to get a question about the UIs. What's different between the two UIs? The correct answer is the way they mount to the grill panel. We have a clip-on and we have a screw-on with some bezel. We have two different types of bezels. A bezel is a clip bezel or a screw bezel that goes onto the front panel. This is the back of the UIs. This is the same as all the UIs. You have two USB ports. You have an Internet Cat 5 cable, and you also have a speaker connection. If that front USB port on the front control panel has grease in it, don't try to stick a USB stick into it. You're going to add a damaged USB stick, or you're going to say, hey, the USB is not taking the programming correctly, etc., because it's not recognized. Well, that's because there's probably grease in there. Open the front panel and disconnect this connection that goes to the USB panel mount and put the USB stick in here that goes directly into it. Inside the grill, you have less chance of having grease inside this port. And your Wi-Fi connection has a dongle. Oops, go back. That dongle will flash when it's talking to the internet. It does not mean it's connected, but it's talking to it. So when you do a replacement of a UI, or you do a brand new install, or the internet goes down, whatever, you're going to see the Wi-Fi symbol with a red exclamation point in it. It may take 24 to 48 hours for it to actually connect to the Wi-Fi, especially on a new grill, because the corporate has to send the signal to connect it to the Wi-Fi. So as long as that's flashing in the back there, you're okay. It's talking to the internet. It will eventually connect. Okay. Again, the grill will work perfectly fine. It does not need to be connected to the internet to work. That's only communications back and forth to the UI. Now, speaking of UI, this picture right here, I'm going to bring this up because it's a nice picture. This picture right here is the Platen harness connection. Let's say that UI is blank and you're trying to figure out what's going on. Well, we know if the UI is blank, we're not replacing it until we check the grounded situation for low voltage wires. Easiest way to do that without even opening up the arm, the Platen, or anything, just shut it off, disconnect all your Platen harness wires here, and turn it back on. If the UI screen comes back on, we know there's a grounded wire someplace going up through the conduit and into the Platen arm or the Platen itself. Okay, that's the quickest and fastest way to check that UI. All right, your solid state relay board is no different than what we've seen before. Remember, it basically allows the DC control over AC outputs to the heaters. Again, each triac has one LED light. Each triac's LED light will flash when it's delivering the appropriate power to the heating element. The reason why it's flashing is because it's pulsating power. So if I were to put an amp meter on my output to that, let's just say my front heating element, which is my front heating element here, it's going to turn around and pulsate on your meter because it's not a constant power that comes out. Okay, so you're not going to see a constant power. It pulsates. That's why the flashes. If that flash is on continuously, there is no DC control over it. That triac has failed closed and is sending continuous power. It's not pulsating, it's just sending continuous power to that heating zone. If it's off, like you see here, no power is being delivered. Now here's the next thing. If this is off and you see no LED lights, but you see the zone, the heating zone, still heating, well, there's only one other possibility. That chances are that element is grounded and it is heating that way. Which that means the element should be replaced. Again, locations are the same as the other SSRBs. Again, this is an assembly, has to be put in that way, can't be installed without the heatsink or the board together. Your SIB board, identical to all the other SIB boards. Again, even the connection points and the LED lights operate the same. In your service manual for the Chick-fil-A unit or any of the other service manuals, Chick-fil-A is page 102, 103 service manuals. Here's the information on the LED lights as well. Don't forget, we have the videos on YouTube that explains that as well. Thermocouples, again, don't forget, we can swap thermocouples if there's temperature related problem, We can swap the SIB board to confirm it for if there's a temperature-related problem. What's different? Here's to something that's different. In your Platen area, the thermocouples go into the Platen, just like the other grill, and we have two safety thermostat discs. In order to get to them, we have to separate the Platen from the cowl. Every time you separate the Platen and cowl, we have to replace the gasket. So when you order a kit, you get two safety thermostats and a gasket. Or if you order a thermocouple kit, you get two thermocouples and a gasket. This way you replace them all at the same time. Also being said, you have the two thermocouples that are being replaced with a gasket, but you're not doing the conduit harness. On the Chick-fil-A unit, there's enough room in the conduit that you can actually fish the conduit, or sorry, fish the thermocouple through the conduit. So just keep that in mind. You don't have to cut the wires to run the thermocouples. You'll be able to fish it through there. On the bottom of the grill, you have, again, your three heating elements. The one in the rear is the largest. The two in the front are smaller, or the same size. Again, you have your thermocouples, and you have your safety thermostats. Your thermal discs or safety thermostats, they open at 500 and reset at 450. They are the same as the other grills as well. And your K-type thermocouples, the output is millivolts. And here's your component life tracking. So you go to Diagnostics, go down to Advanced, hit Start, enter in your, it'll say Login. This is an older picture. They changed it, says Login. You hit Login, enter your password, SERVGCR, and then you get into three options: component life tracking, heater state test, and motion test. The two tests under here, again, need 15 minutes to perform them. The motion test just moves up and down between the upper and lower home switches at different voltage rates for different speeds to see if it gets to where it needs to be within 40 seconds. And then your temperature test is just testing the rise in temperature and make sure it gets done before it times out. Just check this. All right. So again, when you go into your component life tracking, make sure that as you see here, remaining life is 100%, and then details, and then you go ahead and reset it from here. All right, calibrations. Calibrations, with the exception of location of thermocouples, and the tool that we're going to use to calibrate the thermocouple calibrations, and the Platen calibration, everything else is exactly the same as the other grills. One thing we got to keep in mind, again, like we said before, we're not sharing technician access password, SERV, GCR, with any chain managers or owner operators, etc. That's for trained technicians only. On the Chick-fil-A units, we have a password for the owners and manager. You can share this one. It is Eat More, just like their slogan. Eat more chicken. They have access to certain functions in their UI, but they do not have access to everything like you do as a service technician. Power calibrations, same exact thing as we've seen already. So we're just going to fly through that. Touchscreen, same thing, no different. Thermocouple calibrations. This is a little bit different because we have a different cooking service. We need to know where those thermocouples are. So basically, from right to left, we're talking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the same thing: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. On the sixth rib, you're going to go back down from the front to the back 4 inches down for the front thermocouple. And then from and then 15 inches down for the rear thermocouple from the front down. That's where you're going to put it, your temp probe. Now on your grill surface, you have your front and your rear at the same rib. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. On the 6th rib, you'll have your front thermocouple and your rear thermocouple. And again, that's going to be 5 inches down or 7.5 inches down for the first one. And then it's going to be 13.5 inches down for the middle one. And that's going to be on the 6th or 7th rib. And then you have your one in the rear. That's 21.75, 21 3/4 down in the back. Again, on a brand new unit, they're marked so you'll be able to see it. But as the unit gets used, you're not going to be able to see it. This is also in your service manual. Here's the tool for the surface probe. You got to realize the surface probe needs to be a smaller diameter surface probe. So if you use the Atkins wand thermocouple, or if you're using the Fluke filament type wand, that's fine. We used to have it as listed as a part number when these Gen 2s came out. There's not a lot of agencies that carried that particular one. But again, so we've just purchased them at that point in time, and we added a part number. We didn't make no money on it. We just wanted to have accessibility for a technician to get it. We no longer have that part valid, so now you have to go, whoops. Give me 1 minute, I just dropped the mouse. So now you go to Partstown, not Partstown, but you go online to, oh, I do break my mouse. Hang on 1 second. Oh, you gotta love electronics. There we go. All right, so let's go back. So again, we made that available when Gen 2s came out. However, we no longer have it there. So you go online, you go wherever you buy your tools, get a Fluke or Atkins, whatever you need, but it can't be, don't use that big hockey puck we use on the flat grills. Again, we're going to calibrate it the same way using an ice bath, making sure it's reading 32 degrees or 0 degrees Celsius. And then once you're done, you're going to go into calibrations, password, scroll down to calibration, and then we're going to check your temperatures. Remember, it's going to automatically pick the highest temperature that's in the menus that are active. In this case, it'd be 381 and 375 for Chick-fil-A. Hit the green check mark, and you're going to see this, just like before, no different. We're going to wait until the Platen comes up. We're going to check it, and we're going to match our meter to the temperature to the meter by using the up and down arrows. Same process. What's different on this process is right here. The CFA target offset should be 5, 11, and 16.9. That's what they're looking at to see in the offsets. So again, so that's your goal, to get close as possible to that with your temperatures. So you're going to match your temperature, and then you're going to do the offset to one of these that's the closest to it. So if I'm going 335 and I'm temping it, or 380, let's say 381, and I get to 15 of an offset, I'm going to go ahead and take it to 16.9 at that point. Same thing with if it's close to 11, just take it to 11. Basically what that will do is it'll cause the unit to heat a little bit more. So the temperature is a little bit higher than what it actually is. So those are your offsets. So get it to as close as possible to what your meter is saying, and then look at the offset. Are we close to 5? Are we close to 11? Are we close to 16.9? and just move it to whatever those locations are. That's your thermocouple calibrations. Little different, process is still the same. Platen calibration. All right. That one question on the test that says about the grease buildup in these areas can cause the platen not to level correctly. It's mainly for this particular grill. As you can see here, I'll enlarge it. Back here, this is the rear deck assembly. Okay, the bulkhead, if you want to call it that. You can see all that grease is built up and it's got pushed back in here. That's a good ½ inch of grease, so that doesn't allow the platen to sit flush or sit flush or level because that grease is building it up. Same thing here. You have all that carbon down here, so it's not sitting down on the grill surface. When you do your platen calibrations, you got to remove the vapor shield and you got to remove the side skirts when you're doing your calibrations. One thing you got to keep in mind as well is when they come down and they're cooking after you do your platen calibrations, all this stuff is back installed. If this area here is built up with a lot of grease and carbon, well, it's going to push up on the vapor shield, which, if it's enough, it can cause the front of the platen not to come down far enough to cook the product. So that's another thing we got to watch out for. What they want to do is you want to have it nice and clean, so when it comes down to your calibrations, you're doing it correctly. Settings, password, scroll down to platen calibration and go into it. Going to go directly to gap calibration. And here we're going to enter our tool size, which is 80 mil because we're using the L tool. Again, whenever you see auto gap, if you see it on your unit, you have to disable it. Once you have the right instrument size, enter calibration. Again, it's going to go to preheat. When it's preheated, it'll open up. So at this point, you see your gap calibration. Again, so far, everything is the same. We're using the platen position set point for the keypad to pop up to enter in the tool size, to bring it down to the tool size. And at that point, if we have to bring it up and down to get closer to the tool size, just like before, no different, press it and move it in 300 mils in either direction or more. 300 is minimum. That gives enough encoder counts and rotations on the motor to accurately determine where you're at. If you're using the up and down arrows here, you're not going to get an accurate reading on the encoder counts. So eventually those arrows will disappear. You won't see them. Once it gets down, you're going to turn around. Remember, we are not trying to gain a lot of space on the platen. We are using the UI to get as close as possible to this tool size of 80 mil. Once we get there, then we can do a fine-tune adjustment with my adjuster shoulder bolts. On the Chick-fil-A unit, we have one in the front and one in the right rear that you can adjust. The one in the left rear is a fixed one, a floating one, if you would. It just sits there and floats. Just like all the other grills, make sure that your bottom attaching nut that goes through the cowl into the platen has no thread showing. Remember, if I have to change a thermocouple or if I have to change a safety thermostat, I got to separate the platen from the cowl. In order to do that, you have those 6 bolts on each side, and then you have to remove each of these bolts of the shoulder bolts to adjust it in order to separate it. So if somebody does not use blue Loctite when they put it back together, you could end up having a loose adjusting nut on the bottom, and that will cause issues. It has been and it will continue to cause issues for the simple reason a technician that's in there replacing it might not have had blue Loctite when they replaced a thermocouple, for example. So always check that first. Again, here's your adjuster, and then you have your lock nut on top. No threads down here where it connects to the platen, and you should only see maybe half to 1 thread below the lock nut. We're going to turn around and we'll put the gauge in level and not at an angle. And we're looking at it this way. It's going to go in, friction on the front of the gauge, and it will stop at the raised portion. If it doesn't go in, you're a little bit too tight. And if it goes in past the raised portion, you're too loose. So again, we're checking the front and the right rear. And here are those 6 other bolts. You have lock or grease caps on them. Take them off, and they're Allen key type bolts. And they have a torque setting on those bolts. That's 17 foot-pounds, not inches, foot-pounds. Only thing on this grill that has that torque setting is these 6 bolts right here. And that's the difference between the calibrations of the Chick-fil-A unit and all the other ones. You just have to use the L tool, and you got to turn around and adjust the front and the right rear. That's it. And the other one is, and you're using your tool for all 4 corners. The one in the rear, from left to right, you're going to split the differences. You want to err on the tighter side, okay, in the rear. Once you're done, you get everything set the way you want it, and the lock nuts are back locked up in place. You're going to turn it around. You're going to update it. When you update it, that instrument tool size, the 80 mils, you're going to come over here and you're going to turn around. You'll see it go 80 plus 5, so it'll be 85 mils. When that changes, you hit teach, and at that point where that Platen's currently sitting, it knows that is the reference point for further operations, like going down to a gap setting, etc., for a cooked menu, for a menu recipe. All right. Now, this is one thing that we added maybe 6 months ago. Prior to doing an integrity check on chicken fillet, cycle power to ensure settings have been saved. If we do it right, update and then teach, it will be saved, because we're not doing this on any of the other grills. So again, this was just when we were first getting these Gen 2s out there and technicians were doing the setups and the calibrations, they weren't doing it correctly. They were using teach, then update, and that just turns around and messes everything up. So again, just to make sure, if you do it right, you don't have to turn the power off before you do your integrity checks. Hood height calibrations, that's exactly the same as before, except we're looking at 4,300 mils to start instead of 4,500 mils. Again, we have Ansel systems in the Chick-fil-A world that we have to worry about. All right, wire diagram. Well, wire diagram is exactly the same as the other one. It operates exactly the same. Okay, you have your power in through the contactor. You can see here where it comes off of for your switch. It comes off of L. Actually, I'm sorry. It comes off of L3 and L1 for the Chick-fil-A unit instead of L2 and L3. Comes down through your fuses, and at that point, it goes into your switch, and they are 5 amp fuses. How about that? Okay. So I'm pretty sure they're going to be 10 amp fuses, but I'll double check that. They say 5 amp fuses on the wire diagram. I don't see why that would be a 5 amp opposed to a 10 amp, unless it's just because it's working off of one single lane, and that could be the possibility. All right, and then you got power coming in to your power switch. Turn the power switch on, power comes through it, illuminates the LED light, goes back, comes out of the connection point of the harness for the front panel, and then it goes to the AC/DC power supply board, and it goes to my contactor. From here on out, it works identical to all the other grills that are out there on the power supply. So as you can see here, we have power coming into my AC/DC power supply board. It's sending 24 volts down. Okay, and that's where it goes into the SIB board. And here's the power going through my high limits, safety thermostats. Grill surface first, they're normally closed. Again, they open at 500, reset at 450. And then it goes to my Platen, goes through those, and then it comes back out and it goes up to my 208, 240 volt coil on the contactor. and then it closes the contacts, and at that point the power moves into my solid state relay board. Now remember, I was saying the wires will never change color. Black will always be L1, red will always be L2, or blue will always be L3, or A, B, and C. What changes is the pin connections going into the solid state relay board and the color of the connection that goes onto here. There's a strip of color. Yellow is for Chick-fil-A. Just throwing that out there so you know that. All right, again, turn the power on. Power comes in, illuminates, it sends power through all your locations. Again, your 1, 11, 12, and 21, they're green. That's saying, hey, these are my voltage points, my 3.3, my 5, my 12, and my 21 to 24 volts. If they're on, that's saying I'm getting all my correct voltages. You're communicating to the millivolts from the thermocouples are coming in. It's amplifying, multiplexing. It's comparing what screen it's in up here. If we're in a cook screen, which we are in this particular segment, and at that point, it's going to turn around and send it back saying, hey, I need heat. I'm not at set temperature. And it's going to send a low voltage signal down to my SSRB through the ribbon cable. The appropriate triax will start to flash, and then it will send the power up to my heating elements to heat. The triax will continue to flash until it receives the signal from the thermocouple with the millivolt reading after it amplifies and multiplexes, and it says, yep, I'm at temperature based off my UI, and it's going to start to shut down those triacs. Then you're at temperature. Again, the motor circuit is identical to everything else. Your power comes out, it goes through your upper and lower over travel switches, which are normally closed. So as long as they aren't activated, the power will just run freely into the motor and work. When they are activated, it removes the power to the motor, which means it's going to continue sending power out of the SIB board, but it's never reaching the motor, which means the SIB board will never see it reach its target. For an example, let's say it's coming up to the upper home switch, but again, it never seen it. It hits the over travel switch, removes the power from the motor, and after 40 seconds, it gives you an error 6. Same thing on all the other grills. And again, when you get an error 6, it says push green button to try again. Basically, all that does is uses reversing diode, and it reverses the power around that open over travel switch to see if it will reset on its own. And it'll come down to wherever it needs to go to. Troubleshooting is exactly the same. We know that. Let's say we need to, again, for our Chick-fil-A calls, we have to download error codes. So again, if this port right here for the USB stick is dirty, you take this grease cap off and you see grease and water in it, you probably want to open up the front panel. Be careful you don't rip any wires when you're doing it. And disconnect that connection that goes to this port and connect it inside. This way you're not damaging a USB stick and it gets it done the first time instead of having to leave to come back with another USB stick. So again, if there's grease and oil inside this cap, chances are, take a look up under here, use your cell phone, whatever, a mirror. I'm dating myself because I didn't have cell phones with cameras on it when I was doing the technician work. I had to use mirrors to look up inside. So just throwing that out there. At least the cell phones I did have did not have good cameras, like the Nextels, for example. Again, we can import recipes, export recipes, and export system logs. We're exporting a system logs, collect log. When it goes back to the home screen, your collection has been done. Error codes, they are exactly the same error codes in all next generation grills. In the manual, you'll see error codes displayed like this. And our top current error codes, excuse me, are the 41A, B, and C. Again, 41s are insufficient or missing three-phase power. A 42 is a power calibration. A 63 or 64 means the platen is not level. You'll have to level the platen or do a platen calibration. Seal replacements, again, this for their annual PMs or when they do a PM or when you have to change a shaft seal, they are the same. On the knuckle here, the shaft wiper seal, the knuckle here, you have to have a 9/16 inch bolt up here, and there's a brass bushing now on the 9/16 instead of the nylon bushing. Here's where you put your shims if the front's too low. There's your wear pad. All right, make sure you're using blue Loctite on this 9/16 inch bolt. Now there is a torque setting. However, give it a good old crank. Make sure you're holding the platen in the position that it needs to. The platen will sway left to right if that's not tight, or this cross member here is not tight. Upper shaft meets the actuator. Again, 17 foot-pounds for those bolts on the platen, and all the bolts in the back, yellow 70 inch, red 100, blue 200 inch, same torque settings. And again, your seal replacements are identical process. Remember, the shaft is a different size, so the seal that you use on a, let's say, McDonald's grill will not work on a Chick-fil-A, but the process is still the same.